Head to kongos.com/podcast to follow along with today's episode, see all the pictures and links of stuff we're talking about, and don't forget to subscribe. Hey, welcome back everyone to the Front Lounge with KONGOS. This is our 4th or 5th or 6th, depending on what order we put it out, this episode. And we have a very special guest, our good friend and monitor engineer, Geron Rains.
Hello.
Hey, Garen.
How's it going?
So how do you spell your name? Let's get that clear off the bat.
Oh, man. Well, it starts with a G, and then it goes E-R-O-N.
So when we get into a venue for the first time, you say, hey, my name's Garen, but just call me G.
Yeah, pretty much, because people read my name, they'll always say Geron or Geron or...
Gerald.
Yeah, Gerald.
Well, what's the running joke you guys had going? Everyone, you and Mo, or someone was like just subtly calling him Gerald every time you'd call him?
Yeah, you just put it, you would throw it away. Hey, Gerald, you gonna... just to see if he was...
I think this is the first time we've ever set up microphones and plugged them in for you.
That's right. I had no part in setting up these mics.
Well, maybe just explain to our audience what a monitor engineer is, so that they know who they're listening to.
Yeah, so typically on any show you go to, there's 2 audio engineers for most bands, and one of those is the front of house engineer. For us, that's Mick, and that he's the one that mixes the audio for the audience. He controls all the sound that people listen to out front, and then my job is to mix all of the audio for each of the band members. So I've got 4 mixes of the band plus the crew and some other things going on that. So I'm handling a couple more mixes, but it's all in our in-ears rather than through the speakers at front of house.
So just to break it down real clear for everybody, for anyone who's not, involved in music or audio for any reason, a mix is basically the balance of all the different instruments and microphones and everything that we each band member gets their own custom mix, so that if I can hear more of myself if I want, which is usually the case.
Yeah, yours is usually just your vocal.
That's because it's got to be loud to get it over those drums.
And before the in-ear monitors, which were 90s, right? Maybe 80s.
Yeah.
Who was the first band actually that started using them? One of those massive bands. It was like Kiss or something like that. They were used wedges, which are basically speakers that look wedge-shaped, and they would blast up on the stage. So the stage volume was louder and everything. And now you'll see most bands of a certain size using at least partially in-ears. I know a lot of singers still like a wedge, but so whenever you see people on the fucking Grammys taking their earpiece out, they're not getting radio signals as to what to say. They're having a problem monitoring their own voice or whatever.
I think also if you've ever played with in-ears and where you have only an in-ear mix and something goes wrong, when you see a catastrophic failure on stage of a band that basically falls apart or a singer that cannot sing in tune, that is actually a real thing. They're not just shit singers. Like if you can't hear yourself.
Oftentimes, yeah. Sometimes
they're shit singers, but it's a really big deal if you lose your monitoring or you can't hear it properly.
Depending on the size of the stage. Yeah, if the stage is big, it's a bigger deal.
Yeah, or especially if you're running some form of tracks as well. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for things to fall completely apart if the drummer loses his in-ear pack or something.
I was just reading about the Who. And Pete Townsend, he was all into his sequenced synth pods. You can hear him on all those Who tracks, and so they used to play with that. And I think Keith Moon and the rest of the guys just hated it. They hated because they were running a tape machine of recorded synth parts that they were having to lock up with. But they're only getting a wedge mix. It was back in the day when you didn't have an easy way to have 10 different monitor mixes.
Well, couldn't you imagine? If anyone's seen Keith Moon play, he was loud as shit. He just was a maniac on the drums.
Yeah.
And if you've ever sat at a drum kit and hit it, you know how loud it is. And now imagine a speaker next to him blasting loud enough to get over that so that he can hear it and stay on track with it. You'll go deaf after 3 gigs.
I think I still actually have left ear a little bit of damage in my left ear from all the lost leaf gigs we used to do before we had proper in-ear monitors and Jesse's snare drum. I just happened to be sitting on the right of him, and the snare drum just would murder my left ear.
Yeah, I have, even for me as an engineer, I have a little bit of distortion in my left ear from when I was like, how old was I? I was probably 20 years old, so 7 years ago, and I had headphones on, but just for the left ear, and someone clicked open a channel and it was just blaring loud or something like that happened, and it like just was the loudest thing I've ever had in my life, and I think I kind of did a little bit of damage there, so I still get
it's annoying
a little bit.
We went did you come with us to the Shure factory?
No, I did not.
Oh, there's a thing called an anechoic chamber where it's this very complicated pattern on the walls of foam and different wood and stuff like that to disperse sound and absorb sound to get a room as silent as possible, and they use it for testing microphones or testing other equipment where they need a perfectly silent room. And
so it stops all the reflections of sound.
Yeah.
When you walk on a suspended wire cage almost.
Right, yeah. And you can go in there and you can hear your tinnitus first. You'll hear you'll hear your ears ringing.
Yeah.
You'll hear your heartbeat next, and then some people even say they can hear their lymphatic system, so they can hear their lymph nodes, directing whatever around
glands and
hormone
stuff.
Traffic.
That was a scary thing going into that anechoic chamber. I remember the first time we did it, just hearing how bad and how loud the tinnitus was. I was like, oh, geez.
Also, they say
this is going to be a problem.
They say that people can only last about 45 minutes before they really start freaking out. Because
we should put a photo, because it's kind of hard to picture this, So Shure is a company that makes microphones and headphones and all kinds of audio gear, and they actually sponsor us. They, all of our microphones on stage and wireless monitoring systems is all made by Shure, and they've been super cool to us. So they gave us a tour of the factory, or the headquarters, and if you imagine, it's like a Matrix kind of thing. You walk out on this net, basically a wire net. And below you, 10 feet, is space. And there's all these weird shapes of foam sticking out. It feels like a sci-fi movie, basically. And they have this speaker on an arm that swivels so that they can make a noise at any part of the room or place a microphone. And they do extensive testing on all their microphones to kind of measure them.
The funniest thing at the Shure factory was, because so many Shure mics are used in live environments, they need to be kind of tough and rugged and stuff, so they stress test them, and they had a microphone stand with a button that would drop the microphone stand in a room. So there's engineers in there just putting mics on stands and throwing them over, seeing how many
for every asshole that finishes a joke and thinks it's funny to do a mic drop.
Right, that's because some geniuses at the Shure factory were throwing mics on the ground 300 times to make your little dramatic flair possible.
So, Garen, you've been working for us now we were talking about it last night, like 3.5 years almost. Or we met 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. It's almost been in January.
Yeah.
January. It'll be 3 years since we did our first tour together.
Yeah, and this is the first kind of extended break that you've had, which we were on tour for a long time in 2014, 15, 16. So most of the time for these last 3 years you've been with us. But any time that we weren't touring, you were working for someone else.
Yeah.
And now this is the first time you've had any type of extended break. Who else have you been working with in the last couple of years and in between like our tours?
Yeah, a number of bands. I was working for Rat-a-Tat. I worked for this guy, Vince Staples. I worked for a guy, Chris Tomlin. A couple of bands in the Christian market as well. Urban Rescue and Ren Collective.
You did Reliant K too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I was with Reliant K.
That Reliant K was what? Need to Breathe Reliant K? Or
No, that was Switchfoot.
Switchfoot,
Reliant
right.
K, yeah.
Garen is a perfect example of how this business works, particularly in the crew side of things. It seems to be 99% word of mouth. Like, you got those gigs because you met this person on the road, and then they said, "Oh, I know this guy is good." And in fact, it's how we found you when we were touring in July of 2014 in Canada. We were out and the support band had you, and you were the tour manager, merch guy, driver, front of house, monitor,
Yeah.
guitar cleaner upper,
Van-
No,
everything.
I didn't touch any guitars. I don't do that.
I'm assuming you had to divide the bill if you guys got like breakfast.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The bill divider. So yeah, we
Yeah, and
saw
that was
this.
that was before Square Cash or Venmo.
Oh, that was a
man,
nightmare
it's the
days
worst.
of touring.
So it was literally it was you in the band, no other crew. So
Yeah, it was just me and the band.
You were basically doing every job, and that's actually pretty common for bands starting out where they can
Yeah.
pretty much only afford one or two crew.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot to take on, but especially if you're trying to get into the world of touring. And you want to be a front of house engineer or tour manager.
It's funny because that wasn't like when I was working with that band. That wasn't my my goal wasn't to get into touring. I'd never really thought
really?
about it. It wasn't something I was aspiring to. But I had a friend that was in the band, and he's like, "Hey, we need a front of house engineer." I was just like doing some small corporate things and working for a couple of small companies, and then he's like, "Hey, we need someone to come out and tour manage in front of house." And he's like, "Can you do that?" I was like, "Yeah, I can do that."
That's a pretty funny moment to think about that. Whenever that would have been June 2014.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a whirlwind of 4 years. You've been around the world 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And you basically haven't been home, like Dylan was saying.
Have you emptied your suitcase yet? Because when we go on tour, if there's a month break in between tours or less, even if there's a month, I'll leave my suitcase
Intact,
and
yeah.
intact, all the clothes in it, and I'll only wash them and I'll put them back in my suitcase. I won't unpack.
I'll take select things out, like shirts that I like to wear on my days off or stuff like that.
Non-black shirts.
Right.
What's also crazy
when
is
every day's a day off.
Wait, what?
You have to eventually wear black clothing on days off.
Yeah.
Yeah, for people listening, basically, the crew, especially if they're on stage, they wear all black so that they're not a distraction to the audience. And also, it's much more hard. It's harder to see that black clothes are dirty. But what's also crazy is that, so you started off doing everything for that band.
Yeah.
And then you told me last night that you're going out on a January tour with Vince Staples, and you're going to be stage managing an arena show, essentially, like on arena stages, which explain what stage managing is.
Yeah, it's basically a glorified traffic director. No, that's it's kind of managing the local crew that's helping us and being the point of connection between all departments, so between audio, video, lighting, kind of someone to help orchestrate order and speed. We're support on that tour, so we need to be up and down very quickly.
Who's he supporting?
Tyler, the creator.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
How big is your crew?
That for that tour, it'll be. I think we'll have a crew of 8 or 9.
And then local crew on each day is...
Local crew will be a lot higher number than that because they're handling the headline and us, which we're bringing quite a bit of production on both
doing a
accounts.
truck?
So we'll have a truck as the support, yeah.
Okay,
and then
so 1 bus, 1 truck.
we'll be 2 buses, 1 truck, and then Tyler will probably be 2 or 3 of each. I would assume.
Well, okay, so if it's arenas, so to paint a little picture, this is going to be kind of a technical podcast, but there'll be a lot of fun stuff because we've had some great stories from the road together. But to paint a picture of an arena tour of that scope, so now we're talking 3, 4 semi trucks, 3 to 4 or 5 buses. They'll show up, and I'm guessing there's probably 20 to 30,000 pounds of gear in each truck.
Yeah, actually, you can go upwards to like a max that most trucking companies will allow is 70,000 pounds of gear. And when you're doing arenas, you're carrying a lot of motors, you're carrying a lot of steel to hang things with and stuff like
So
that.
they're carrying their own PA.
We won't be.
Tyler will.
We won't be carrying a PA on that run. It's small arenas in huge venues.
Okay.
So the venues mostly all have audio systems installed already. So we're not taking PA on that
So
one.
stage managing, I mean, if you've ever seen backstage footage of venues that size, you can see how many people are involved, how much gear there is, how many cables there are to run. And it's actually quite an art. We've seen it done really well and done really badly on big and small tours, where each riser, each little platform that each musician has to be. It is like directing traffic, or airline traffic. You know, parking this, parking that. Which one do we move first? Because there's only one way it can go forward or one way it can go backwards.
It's also customer service because, like you said, you're the point between the local crew and then the traveling crew, and so every day you're meeting 20 to 30 new people, and you're going to deal with nice new people, assholes, and like the stage manager sets the mood and the tone for the whole thing.
Yeah,
because we've had a couple of stage managers that are very aggressive, and it sets the mood of the whole production into like a bit of a combative mood. Whereas when most stage managers for us, like if we have a local crew guy that's upset, we know that guy is a dick because there's no possible way for anyone to have a bad mood with Mo.
That's so true.
You know, he goes into it. So that's such a big part of it. And speaking of arena tours, that's my first memory of you, other than when we were on that thing in Canada, was we were in Nuremberg, Germany, backstage at One Republic show, and sitting in the arena thinking of who we could get to come work for us. And we all said, what about that guy?
That one guy.
That one guy.
Gerald.
Gerald.
I actually suggested you, Garen, first. So just put, just and I was like, FYI, your indebtedness.
Like, as long as we exhaust every other possibility, we can try him out.
And if it weren't for us, you would have been a complete failure. Nobody else would have recognized your talent. It was our unique perception that allowed you a path out of the mud.
That was kind of fun putting that all together because we were, I think it was November or December, we were opening for One Republic in Europe, and that whole year we had been touring, and we had only had a front of house engineer, and he was doing both monitors and front of house on the same console, and it was getting to the point where we really needed to split that off. So we thought, okay, who can we find for who? And also, the pay that a monitor engineer gets ranges quite a lot depending on the budget, depending on the size of the tour. So we were trying to figure out what we could afford, and we just remembered this guy on this tour that we did who was doing fucking everything. And he didn't complain. He did a good job on the mix, and that's how people get hired.
Right,
you get seen doing a good job.
It's funny, I didn't realize you hadn't mixed that much stuff until
I had mixed like one rock band really before that.
And also, if it weren't for that date in Saskatoon, I think because on that tour you had no time to set up and so on, and finally on that one gig in Saskatoon you had a decent board and time to set up. Yeah, and it was a great mix, and we're like, oh, he can mix.
So I think
we called him up, or Mick emailed you or something from Europe, and hey, do you want to go on tour?
I think it was an email. I remember because I was leaving after we had done that short thing. I had done some other stuff with a few other bands that just kind of started along, and I was flying into my next tour with the same band that was opening for you guys. Mm-hmm. So I was going back to join up with them, and I was like, man, I don't know. I don't want to do this again. I had like
driving.
I was like too much driving. I had a pretty rough time at it. And then on that trip, Mick emailed me, and I was like, yes, everything's going to be okay.
Garen's kind of the opposite story of Chris, who is kind of off and on with us. He went from never doing any road work, and we needed a guy back then to do merch. So Mick called him up out of the blue and said, I'm out on tour with this band. Didn't say who it was, didn't say what the tour was or anything. Like, can you do the next three months or 2 months worth of work? And he agreed to it, kind of sight unseen, and showed up in Milwaukee at Summerfest to be with us on a bus in like the most cushy environment. So he went from like zero to fairly cushy touring. Like, he didn't pay his dues like most people in this business.
But in all fairness, he thought he was going to a van.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying he was like he wasn't.
You remember at the airport, he's like he didn't realize the bus was
like,
there.
Oh, whoa.
When, to be honest, most people pay more dues than I did. I still didn't pay that much.
What is this? This is a very weird thing. People have an obsession with paying dues. Like, you could theoretically pay dues for eternity. So eventually you want to stop paying. Like, I'm not interested in paying dues.
No, I don't want to pay them myself. But if Chris didn't pay them, I like to make fun of him.
Yeah, sure.
Well, let's learn a little bit about Garen. Garen, so where are you from? Give us a little bit of background. I mean, we know.
Of course.
Give our audience a little bit of background.
What golf course were you born on?
I was born on the... No, I don't know. I was born in Oklahoma. I spent most of my time growing up in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, which is where my family still lives. My folks live there, and my grandparents live there. I went to college down in San Diego and stayed there for a while. Tried living here in LA for like 10 months and gave that up, moved back down to San Diego.
Why'd you give LA up?
I can't do it here. I just can't. And then now I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
By live in Nashville, you mean you spend a week or two here, there?
You know, it was that way for most of this year, but like I said, I'm actually in like an extended break off, and I've been off for like a month or two.
So you guys are going to go play golf tomorrow.
Yeah,
you are a very good golfer.
Very good is subjective,
I don't mean professional,
but I'm good.
But I mean, like,
I play
your
a lot.
average person, you would beat every average person.
Let's put it this way: his best score is 1 under.
Yeah.
For any golfers, that's not easy to do.
That was a while ago.
So why is that? You mean you grew up in like?
So yeah, my parents actually, when we moved to Arizona, they opened up a franchise of a golf retail store. So they like sell clubs and apparel and things like that. So I grew up around the sport. Spent a lot of time playing as a kid, and then played in competition through high school. Considered trying to pursue it after that, but I realized it just wasn't something I wanted to do.
You were saying off air that your dream is to play with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, right?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. I would love to beat a 2.8 handicap.
That's what he says he is?
That's what he says he is.
As
a 75-year-old man,
He
which
says
is
he's
a
a what?
very difficult thing to do. He says he's a 2.8, which is better than I've ever been.
There's no arena
Fake
of
news.
life that he doesn't allow lying to enter and
Have you
invade.
seen-
Is funny.
Have you seen that picture of him playing tennis? Yeah. There's no fucking way he's a 2.8 handicap.
It's very like Kim Jong Il. Did he shoot an 18?
Yeah, that's what I think. He claims that he shot an 18 on an 18-hole golf course.
So 18 holes in one in a row.
Yeah, but that was a par 72 golf course.
You know what's crazy? But you know what's so crazy about that is that he didn't think to like add in like one mistake to make it seem possible. He's just like, it's so divine.
Wait,
Well, no, God doesn't make a mistake.
No, I'm saying he could have been like, and then I bogeyed on the 18, so I got a 19 or whatever it was, you know? So, Garen, also, we were in Salton Sea driving back from Phoenix
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and we're driving along, and there's millions of palm trees out there where they have palm tree farms, and it turns out your family is like the Don Corleone of palm trees. Your uncle, tell us about that a bit.
Yeah, my uncle is fantastic. He's a great person, and he, as far as my understanding goes, he patented a way to cut a palm tree back a long time ago that is the best looking palm tree you can buy. And so, he built a business around selling palm trees. So whenever you see a palm tree that looks really, really nice, it's probably my uncle's.
Yeah, you were saying, I mean, like driving down Las Vegas Boulevard.
Yeah,
like,
I'm pretty sure every single palm tree like down the Las Vegas Strip is his, like all those ones that are planted along.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And what, he also has date farm or date palm trees as well?
I think he has a lot of things that he does. But yeah, he owns a Shields Date Garden in Palm Desert, which has great date shakes.
Oh, yeah, you said it was like one of the original date shake places.
Yeah, I think they invented the date shake at Shields.
You know, when you guys started talking about date shakes, I'd never heard the term before in my life. I couldn't figure out what you were talking about.
Does it sound like an event?
Is that like a thing?
Sounds like an event
Is that
you do
a West Coast thing?
after
or is
dinner,
it,
go on a date shake.
Yeah. shake it out with your date. But all these date palms along the 10 freeway from between Arizona and California.
Yeah.
It's all these places you can get. It's like a milkshake made with dates.
Yeah, and it's fantastic.
I had one. It's pretty good. I mean, I get the buzz now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right.
I got one more thing to talk with Garen about, because when we go on tour, we have these Pelican cases, which are these super heavy-duty cases that you can kick and throw and put underwater, like military-level cases. And Garen carries an entire case filled with just coffee paraphernalia.
That's true.
And no one hates him because of it. We give him a lot of shit for it. But what are you carrying there? Like an AeroPress?
Yeah, I usually take an AeroPress and a V60.
And a kettle.
And a kettle.
And a hand grinder.
Yeah, grinder, and a couple mugs, and some filters.
Remember when we were talking about snobs What were we talking about on the last episode?
You were making fun of snobs.
Well, yeah, Garen is definitely with the rest of us for the most part a coffee snob.
I have to clarify. I mean, I am a coffee snob. I really enjoy good coffee, but I also don't care about just having like a shit cup at a Denny's or something like that. I'll do that anytime.
Right? Yeah. When you're with Jeff, when you guys get into a room together, Jeff, who's been on the road with us recently doing photography, he's also a coffee snob. He was a barista.
He is a coffee snob.
Yeah, he was sending me those water packets that you put in your water. He was like, "You should get these water packets. Put them in your water.
Water in your water.
You get distilled water, and then you put these mineral packets in the distilled water.
Yeah,
get your So you got to pay a bunch of money.
That's why I was excited when Garen was coming out here.
I didn't get the water packets.
to come out and work in LA for a couple of days with us, because I just signed up for this coffee delivery service here in LA, and it's like that's the most LA thing. It's the most LA hipster thing you could do, but I'm excited to try. I haven't tried it yet. I'll let you know the next week or two how it turns out. But basically the guy roasts to order the day before they deliver it to your house. And
are you a customer or a client?
Hopefully both.
No, what I mean is like when people describe you as being a client for something, which they try to they try to fucking make it. Yeah, I'm taking new clients for my coffees.
That's what he said. That's what I had been going to the website because I read about this place and I was looking for somewhere to buy coffee and just try it out. It's not expensive. It's like normal price of coffee. And for 3 or 4 weeks, he wasn't accepting new clients. So I finally saw an opening, got my name on the list, sent my headshot over.
Well, what's so special about this coffee?
Nothing. It's roasted.
Wasn't he rated the best in Los Angeles?
Yeah, LA Weekly rated the best coffee in Los Angeles, best roaster.
Between a customer and a client, like when do you become a client?
You're a customer at Walmart. You are a client at.
If I was a therapist, I would say I had customers.
Some other fancy place.
Churning out these customers at my therapy.
Oh, sorry, you got to leave. I got a new customer coming in.
All right, so let's talk about music. We'll start with the new Taylor Swift album because Garen was all about Taylor Swift.
Yeah, but I haven't listened to the new album.
All right.
What is the new album called again?
Why is everyone picking on me?
The joke is that Garen really did like Taylor Swift for a long time at one point, and when the new album came out in her first single, which was Look What You Made Me Do, everyone texted on the group chat with, we've got a group chat with the band and everyone who's been on our crew in the past and currently. We texted Garen and said, "Dude, what happened between you and Taylor Swift?"
And I let him know we broke up. It's done. All right, moving is over.
I've used
moving on to music.
Diplo talks shit about Taylor Swift or something like that, and there was just this army of people on Twitter, like Taylor Swift fans just attacking him.
Oh yeah, so that's a dangerous territory.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this guy Blake Mills, who Danny introduced me to, but then you also use when you're flashing a PA.
Yeah.
So I guess tell us briefly what flashing a PA is, and then we can talk about that Blake Mills.
Sure. So flashing a PA when you're mixing front of house. You every day you spend a good amount of time just listening to what's happening in the room before there's people in there, so you can tweak and change whatever parameters you need to change to make it sound like your show. So one of the guys I listen to is Blake Mills. I listen to a couple other people as well, but man, I think that guy's fantastic. And his records sound incredible. He actually produced one of my favorite records right now, which is the Alabama Shake Sound and Color. I think he had a huge hand in.
Oh, he produced. I didn't really.
I'm pretty sure he's one of the producers.
Yeah, if
on
you
that.
go, I mean, I knew he produced that, but then I looked up his discography, and he's just on everything, either as a player or co-writer on something. Like the list of stuff he's involved with is just enormous.
So what is it about that track, or
what is the track that you guys?
If I'm Unworthy.
Yeah, If I'm Unworthy, and for me, it starts with just guitar. It's just a guitar that kind of plays this looping, like hypnotic sort of thing for a little while, and so it's just guitar, and then his vocal comes in, and it's so crisp and clean. And I've listened to that a ton. And I know what that sounds like. And that's the biggest thing, like when you're tuning a PA, is it's not necessarily all about the quality of the song that you're listening to, but it's how well you know what's happening, and what it's supposed to sound like, what it sounds like through a real true system. And so that Blake Mills song, I think, is just it's a very easy thing for me to pick out a couple of qualities with the PA.
Yeah, so you know what the song should sound like, having listened to it across 1,000 different systems, and then you know what to tweak in the EQ or anything on the speakers. So, I mean, so Mick uses AC/DC Back in Black specifically for the kick drum, right? Like he wants to hear how the kick drum and the bass response of the room is with that song.
So low mids and stuff.
So it's quite funny when you're on tour for 4, 5, 6 months, you hear AC/DC Back in Black 3 or 4 times a day for 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, I usually use like 4 or 5 songs. I always do the same order and use each song to pick out kind of what I'm listening for in it. And Mick does the same thing, but Back in Black is his go-to. He'll listen to that like 3 times before he does anything else.
That Blake Mills song, though, there's something about it. It feels like old school dynamics in terms of the growth of it, just even volume wise. Like, it's weird. Today's music, you press play, the verse is as loud, the chorus is loud, the bridges are loud, and it doesn't feel like you go anywhere. And it's weird that it's so exciting that it actually loses excitement. Whereas this Blake Mills track, to me, just feels so naturally exciting because there's real dynamics in the sound.
Yeah, it's a bit like, and also there's that payoff, at the end of it. It's a bit like the Bill Withers' "Use Me." Mm-hmm. When he saves that rhythmic hand clap thing just for the very end of the song, and he doesn't repeat it. It's like he doesn't try to milk it. He just saves that big payoff for the end. Yeah,
well,
Blake Mills.
You saw Blake Mills, didn't you? Haven't you seen that?
Yeah, I went with Topher Gerbet, Chris Gerber in Phoenix to see him at Crescent in a small venue. I think probably the best show I'd seen that year. It was just him and a drummer and a bass player, right? No, a keyboard player. Shit, maybe you're switching.
He's a young guy too, right? He's young too, right? He's a young.
Yeah, he's youngish. Yeah, he's best guitar sounds I've heard
good
live.
For his age.
Yeah, he's good for yeah, his all of his sounds he gets on his records, he gets them live. All of his sounds are excellent.
I think those are my favorite artists to listen to records and to see them live. Like everyone I can think of, like Chris Stapleton is the same way for me, as well as the Alabama Shakes.
I can tell he's amazing. I don't think his records they're not organic as like Blake Mills are for me. They sound Nashville. They sound like the pinnacle of Nashville production.
He is like the Nashville dude. Yeah. But I still I really enjoy listening to his album just because I can see it represented when he plays.
Oh yeah,
that's interesting that he produced the Alabama Shakes album because that's a really, really nice organic sounding album.
Yeah, kind of goes along with what Blake Mills does for himself too.
What I would like to do on our album is not that, because now we have synths. So
yeah, but there's a way.
For those
even
of you
with
looking
synths,
for organic sounds, you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah, but it's semi-organic because as we're finding with some of these old vintage synths that we've stole from our dad, or that you've bought one or two of these new analog ones, there is something magical in those. Mm-hmm. Particularly that we'll talk about in gear section, but that ARP Odyssey, just magical sitting in front of that.
I think the Roland Jupiter 8 is the most magical one we have up there.
It's got all the colors to make it magical. What else? Music-wise, I just wanted to talk about. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to and recommend to check it out. This new John Coltrane documentary on Netflix, and it just reminded me of him. Because you forget about someone in your music collection and just don't listen to them for a while. So you go back and listen to Love Supreme. I don't know if you've ever listened to that album. Probably played on the bus a couple of times. It's a little crazy to play on the bus. It's not like very backgroundy chill music, but I guess apparently he was going to call it a La Supreme. Mm-hmm. But even back then he got kickback. Probably from the label, probably from the marketing department. Like,
Had he
Love Supreme is a better title. So even if
I don't think he is I don't think he was Muslim. He just, it's a pretty non-denominational talking about, it's a devotional album. So he called it Love Supreme, obviously, and there's that chant in it. But if anyone hasn't listened to that album, just go check it out. It's one of the great all-time jazz
John
albums.
Coltrane, we listened to so much jazz, especially Johnny and I. Before we even started the band KONGOS, we were doing jazz at Arizona State University, and that was kind of our world for a while. And this was like before YouTube as well. So when YouTube came around, we're dating ourselves here. We found all these clips of John Coltrane, and there's one, I forget which festival it was. It's a black and white video. We'll find the clip of them doing a live performance, the John Coltrane Quartet, and the drummer was a guy called Alvin Jones, also one of my favorite. And he and John Coltrane, it was outdoors and it was cold and it was nighttime, and they were just playing so hard and they were so into it that literally they were steaming. You can see steam just piping off of their bodies. It's one of the coolest videos that you'll see.
One of the legends about John Coltrane and why he's such a crazy phenomenon in the world of jazz is he'd be playing these long sets, as they often are in jazz clubs, and in between sets, so he'd do like 45 minutes on, 20 minutes off, 45 on, just the whole night. He would go back to his dressing room and just practice. Like, he was just one of these, insane people that...
Cocaine is a hell of a drug.
No, he was on heroin.
Well, he's both.
He was...
I don't know if he did cocaine. I mean, I could be wrong, but he was more heroin. And he kicked it cold turkey.
We'll watch this documentary and find out.
Anyway, he's just one of those crazy guys that reminds you that you are not worthy to call yourself or pretend that you're a musician. So I guess let's move on to the music business. Every week we talk about some aspect of the music business, and for this week with Garen, because about 30 to 40 times a week this comes up when we're on tour, we're going to talk about frequent flyer status with airlines.
Well, because Garen is very, very close to the top tier
I'll be
status.
getting
Where are you at right now?
top tier status. Well, let me pull out my app. I'll give you some exact numbers here.
This is how every conversation actually goes. 3 or 4 times you walk into a dressing room a week, someone's going, I'm about 88,000 miles now. I need 12,000, but that flight to Cleveland's going to get me there. And it's ridiculous. But the reason it's important for us on tour to get this status is, number one, first and foremost, we fly with about 21, 22 pieces of gear. And 14 or 15 of them are heavy, like overweight, 60 pounds.
We're at nearly 15 or 16 now that are heavy.
So if you do the math and figure out how much that would cost you on American Airlines, for instance.
Well, I can tell you, because I remember doing...
I
remember doing a show where it was back when Mick was the only one that had it, and he wasn't there for it, and it was just me and you guys, and I think Mo and Chris.
So what did
were
it
there.
come to?
I think we ended up, for the one trip, we ended up spending like over $3,000 total in baggage fees.
Right, and that was
one trip.
And we were platinum, so
you guys were platinum at that. So
it would have been $3,000 each way.
So I mean that's when you get up to the higher tiers, you get 3 free bags or whatever. You get these perks that are nice perks, but for us, it actually ends up saving us literally thousands of dollars.
It's
every
really
trip.
fun to talk about.
Explain to us where you're at right now and what the benefits are of reaching this next level of godliness.
This podcast is brought to you by American Airlines because they hooked us all up with executive platinum.
I'm
Not
currently
really.
So you have to get qualifying dollars and miles. I'm currently at $11,684 of 12,000, so I have just a little over 300 left. And then I'm at 94,022 miles of 100,000 miles.
So you're just about there. So these next couple flights that you're doing for Vince Stable.
No, it's just vacation.
Oh,
I'm going to go to San Diego.
So
hang
I mean,
out.
the thing is, several years, either us or Mick has. I mean, Mick has flown twice to Australia
this year.
Twice simply to get miles.
Yeah.
So last year he flew Phoenix, Los Angeles, Sydney, Sydney, Melbourne, Sydney, Los Angeles, Phoenix in 2.5 days, just to get those miles and points and whatever
He
acquired.
stopped in Sydney
and to go
for
have
ramen.
Szechuan food.
Yeah, he had Szechuan food. But and as crazy as that is, it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
And that concludes our.
well, I was just going to say, what are the other perks that Like, why is it so important to get to?
The first class lounges, obviously. You get a full meal and free drink and all sorts of fun things.
It's fun. It's funny when Mick takes advantage of it on the plane. Like, he's got executive platinum, and even if he's not sitting in first class, he'll be in the back of the plane. He'll make sure he takes advantage of it. He'll ask the flight attendant for his cheese snack and his free beverage.
That will be me next year.
Yeah.
I order a gin at 6 on like an overnight 6 a.m. flight that I don't drink just because I'm going to get every single dollar out of it.
I feel like the flight attendants are always on to me because whenever I've tried to get a little mini drink and they open it. Then they look, they make eye contact, and
you need to order it with a mixer or something because then they know that you want to mix it yourself, and then you don't open it.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty clever.
They are supposed to recognize you and your executive platinum because a bunch of us got exec plat this year, and they look at the manifest. So even if you're not in first class, they go down when they're doing drinks, and this has happened to me a few times. I felt super special. We were flying coach, but they came around, with the drinks and the food and stuff like that, and they looked at me and they go, "Oh, Mr. KONGOS, would you like a snack or a drink?
Would you like it's a cheese platter snack. Would you like your cheese platter snack?
There's options. One of them is
you like
prepackaged.
Your Lunchables, Mr. KONGOS?
One of them is prepackaged hummus, which is not good. But I like to look over. I was flying next to Gerbet, Chris, our guitar tech, and I looked over and I said, "Chris, would you like a snack?" And I gave him mine, and he felt real special.
Our generosity knows no bounds.
So anyway, that's something we talk about constantly because it is important, and it's also little perks that keep it fun while you're traveling. Garen, what's the worst job on tour?
The worst job I've had, or just in general?
No. You personally, which job do you hate? Like, if we said, Garen, you're doing merch tomorrow for the rest of the tour, or you're doing
well, you could do
whatever.
that, and then you probably wouldn't sell any merch because I don't deal with people very well.
But I mean, since you've done every job, which ones did you're like, fuck this, I hate this?
Let's see. One tour I did, I was working as an assistant tour manager. It was for like an arena-sized tour, and so my job was basically comprised of ordering food most of the time, dealing with like after-show food, and actually one part of that job I did really enjoy was I got to put tape down everywhere. Literally everywhere in the entire arena,
you mean
just
to
like
mark
tape
out?
And mark, which that was kind of fun. But everything else about that.
So so that tape thing, what you mean is like
arrows,
and lines
like
to make sure everyone
tell
knows
you where you're going.
Yeah,
which I guess I enjoyed that part of it.
and that seems silly, but it's an important thing because every night you're in a different arena and
you're looking for
or it just makes it much easier.
Yeah.
So it looks like these silly little signs like bathroom.
Bus,
and you know where it is, but after 30 days, it really helps.
I think that I would probably honestly say I haven't really had other than that time that I was doing everything. There hasn't been a single job on tour that I don't really enjoy. I just enjoy touring, I guess you'd say.
What's your favorite job on tour?
Monitors. I love mixing monitors for you guys.
Why? What? Oh, your job is secure, Garen.
Yeah. I'm also really good at sucking up.
Thought that was going in a different direction.
So, would you rather mix monitors in front of house?
Probably would depend on the artist, but yeah, for the most part, I'd probably rather be at monitors. I like the relationship between a monitor engineer and the band better than I do the relationship between the front of house engineer and the audience.
Right. Yeah, because that's a combative relationship, basically.
Tell us about our monitor mixes. I'm sure you've got opinions that you haven't expressed properly about the way we listen to our
your mixes are like so crazy different, each one of you. I don't think I've ever mixed a band that doesn't have like at least some similarities, which is funny because you would expect that with you guys being brothers, that you'd have at least some sort of similar thing that you're listening for. But each individually is so very different.
We're almost sitting in here. So go through. What does Danny's mix sound like?
Danny's mix is it's a lot of taking things away. So it's like not much drums because he's kind of right near the drums. And Danny often doesn't wear one ear, which is natural so that he can hear his amps. So it's mostly just his guitar and vocal and then it's balancing Dylan your vocal with his a lot of the times because he likes it your vocal in the center and like just right below his.
He sings a lot of the harmonies. All right, what about me? What am I going to learn about myself?
Yours is let's see, what would I say? It's a challenge. I actually, when I first started working for you guys, I struggled with your mix the most, trying to figure out what to do because you have a very unique voice and like how you sing is very different. So we tried a ton of different like things, from like compressing your vocal a lot more to just not compressing it at all, throwing different reverbs on. And I think this last year is finally like, I really like your mix now. And I actually probably listen to your mix more than most people's because I have to make more changes too. But, but yeah, yours was always just fighting a vocal and what to do with it.
I think part of that is actually a language barrier that, you know, most of the other guys in the band are a lot more technically knowledgeable than I am. So even I'm probably more technically knowledgeable than a lot of other bands, but trying to describe what you want to a monitor engineer is very difficult if you don't speak the same language, because it's like listening to someone tell you what they want out of a mix in a studio, like a label exec who, you know, they don't know anything, and they're like, can you add more blue? When they're like, can you add more music to this song? And you know, it doesn't mean anything. So I think that's part of the difficulty is trying to explain to a monitor engineer what exactly you want out of a mix. You can't just say, can you add more of, you know, that sound that goes, you have to use language that is you know, very specific. So
that's Danny's vocal.
Well, sorry, before we move on to Jesse and Joey, what was Logan saying about, he had someone come in and he's an editor, a guy that's been editing this reality show for us, and the editor is someone who knows the story. He asked him...
Logan, he's a camera guy, editor, video person we work with quite a lot. He was editing a project, and the producer came in and asked him if he could move the camera on an edit... As in,
to another
after
angle.
the fact.
Like off axis?
Yeah.
To another angle.
As though it was virtual reality. He said, can you... I don't even know what was going through his head. Maybe he thought... The only thing I can think of is that he thought they had shot it twice at different angles. But I was like, so maybe that's what he meant. And Logan said, no, he literally wanted Logan to move
maybe
the
it's from
camera.
the future, where they have like multi-dimensional cameras. You just choose it after the fact. Like, oh, we should have shot that at close-up.
Right, yeah.
That's pretty good.
I'm always...
Okay, so what about my mix?
Johnny, you probably have the most balanced mix of everybody. It's a little keyboard heavy, obviously, because you're playing keyboards. But you have like the most drums. Like there's a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more clarity across the whole thing. It's like way more even because you're not having to deal with something like guitars,
right?
You know, which you need to feel stage volume.
You leave both ears in too.
Yeah, most of the time I keep both my ears in. Yeah. The struggle for me is all my sounds change so much song to song, and there's no physical feedback. Like when you play a guitar in front of an amp, you still feel a bit of the amp. Like mine's all in the digital world, so I don't feel anything. So that's the struggle for me.
And then Jesse, as a monitor engineer, I'd probably say you're the craziest person to mix because there's no other band really that has a drummer be also one of the lead singers. It's very rare, at least. There's a couple of them out there, obviously, but
go on.
So
Anderson .Paak.
Your vocal has to be so loud, and you have such a huge range in your vocal too, from being super quiet, like when you sing down low, to where it's your song and you're singing like quite loud. So dealing with the compression on your vocal, as well as having basically no drums in the mix because your vocal has to be so present. Just so weird as a drummer. I mixed one other drummer that I would not listen to his mix during a show because his drums were so freaking loud. And that's how most drummers are, but
it's
loud.
It's just loud across the board.
It's a little bit of a circle jerk there.
Yeah.
Well,
they just want to hear their fills, but because I sing so much, that you got to think that vocal mic is sitting right above my drum kit, so all the drums are filtering into it, and also, you know, I'm between the bass amp and the guitar amp, so I'm feeling all that on stage. Basically, I'm defending myself here as to why I have an awkward mix.
No, I mean, I agree with it. It's just
this
weird.
leads perfectly into kind of our member berry section, which is our reminiscing about the past, and it can be on any subject, but we'll kind of continue on the monitor engineering thing when we played Life is Beautiful Festival. And to set this up, that was the first show of our Egomaniac tour, really, where we were first show, and we had this great headlining slot on one of the small stages in Las Vegas, and we're playing to probably 10,000 people or so. I don't know, maybe it was a little less, but it was a packed crowd, and that was one of the biggest fuck-ups we've ever had on tour.
Yeah.
And maybe you can explain to us.
Sure, I can take
what the feeling was.
I can take the majority of the blame. I won't take all of it, but basically, there's one song that the guys play, I Don't Mind, where Danny and Dylan switch instruments. So Danny is playing bass and Dylan is playing guitar. So I had set up a different scene on the console. Most of the time, I just mix. Layman's terms here. You can, as an engineer, you can have basically a different setting for every single song. A lot of people do that to change effects and all sorts of different things. And so the only time I really need to do that is for that one song, because they switch instruments, which means that everything changes. And so I had programmed all that in, and during rehearsals for that tour, we never ran that song. And what ended up happening is that there was a little terrible little check mark clicked on the console that that changed all of my routing. So like the vocal mics were going into like another channel on the console, and the tracks were going somewhere else. And basically what happened was I hit the button for the song, and there's this big pop, and all of a sudden nobody has any vocals and no tracks are there. There's no click track. There's nothing. But out front, everything's the same. Like, it didn't change for Mick out front. So the audience thinks that nothing's going wrong. But
and they're yelling at us like, just play the song.
Yeah, from our perspective, that was one of the most uncomfortable moments on stage ever, at least for me, is because you've got people, it's such a cliche, you've got people in the audience shouting at you, play Freebird, play a drum solo, accordion solo, and we were there for a good 6 to 7 minutes because we've got really great footage of this, and you can see the.
You guys did do a good job of calling up Mo, and you guys can play a song, without really even needing monitors, and you guys went to that, but it was still awkward.
It's proof of the relativity of time, because it felt like a fucking eternity up there.
I've had one other time in my career where something like that happened, and I was with Ratatat in Paris. We were headlining Pitchfork Music Festival in Paris, and
hang on, somebody's at the front door. Hold that thought, G.
Okay.
We are back. That was Mo Gordon at the front door interrupting our very important podcast. So Mo will be on our next podcast, and we're going to reprimand him. Sorry, carry on with your story, G.
Yeah, sure. So I was saying there's only one other time that I've had that kind of catastrophic failure happen on a stage, and I was with Ratatat, and we were in Paris at the Pitchfork Music Festival headlining, and so it's a huge show, and during our intro, when the band's about to walk out on stage, I hear these like these sizzly kind of popping sounds, and it sounds like electrical things happening. I'm like, something electrical is happening. I don't know what. And then they're on stage. They get out on stage, and he goes to start playing the keyboard. And what I think had happened was like a transformer had like sent like a huge amount of voltage down, because we're in Europe, so we had transformers to run on US power, because they have different power stuff over there. So one of those transformers had sent like a ton of voltage down and fried the keyboard, which is one of the main instruments for them. It had also somehow fried one pedal on the bass pedal board during the intro, and so we're trying to figure out how to fix all these things. And we had a spare keyboard, but the tech had not loaded any of the sounds into that keyboard, so it was basically useless. And so we had no keyboard, and like basically we ended up taking the bass straight into the cab. But I remembered it being like a catastrophic failure. I was like, this is awful. He played all the keyboard parts on guitar. He's an incredible musician, Mike is, and so he played everything on the guitar, but it just sounded weird, and I thought it was awful. And the whole thing's on video, so I went back and watched it when I got back to the States, and I was like, man, how bad was this? And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was from the audience perspective. It didn't feel nearly as terrible as it did on stage.
Yeah, there's just something about that on stage, and I mean, you'll see it in this docuseries we're working on. That's a big a part of one of the episodes. But there's just this ridiculous shot of me, like just staring blankly into space, going like, because I just froze. I was like, I don't know what the fuck to do. Like nothing was working that night. It's weird how kind of
it was also just the kickoff to the Egomaniac tour.
Just set the tone for the whole year.
Very deflating.
So Jesse, you were saying you have this memory, and I'm remembering it now. We have a lot of these similar memories in the Austin Lounge. Yeah.
Well, what's his name?
Jason from the American Airlines. So one of the perks of the miles status that we discussed earlier is that you get, well, depending on the airline that you're with, you can get into the VIP lounges where they have free drinks and food and whatever. And so we've done a lot of gigs in Austin. We're always flying in and out of that airport. And one year we did Austin City Limits, so it was 2 weeks in a row we were in that airport. And the bartender at this lounge got to know us, and he was a cool guy, and he like basically loaded us up on free drinks, so we would always fly in and out of Austin hammered. So following that trend, we were flying out of Austin to London for some promo last year, and Garen took advantage of the free drink situation.
I sure did. I had
and we
3.
had a 10-hour flight. And you were pretty happy. You were pretty happy for about 30 minutes of that flight, and then you were passed the fuck out.
Yep, I slept the whole way.
10-hour flight. We get into London. I don't even know what time of the day it was. It was an overnight flight, so you're completely disoriented. We're in the customs line, and when you're traveling with gear and you're working, you have to have special paperwork to get in and out of a country. Usually, Mick, our tour manager, had handed out to everybody all the paperwork that they needed so that they could go through the line. And we're in Austin. In Austin, yeah. And so we're in London. Garen's like, fuck, I don't know, where's my paperwork? Mick didn't give it to me. He didn't give it to me. You were convinced. And Mick's like, I fucking did give it to you.
He kept saying, he's like, I gave it to you, man. And I was like, I don't think you did. And so I was asking, does everybody else have theirs? And everyone's like, yeah, we all have ours. I was like, Mick, I think you missed me. And I was like giving him some shit for it. And we finally we got up to the line, and they ended up calling us all through at the same time. So I didn't even need it, but because everybody had the whole copy. But I was 100% convinced that Mick didn't give it to me. And then 2 days later, I was like doing some stuff, I don't know, getting something out of my backpack, and I found it in the bottom of my backpack.
There's nothing Mick likes more than when he knows he's right. And you, particularly, it's like you and him.
Yeah.
I don't know why you two have this thing. I've noticed it from a distance.
Because we both always...
You both always think you're
right.
You both always think you're right. You almost lost your voice there, Garen. You're getting emotional about this. But I just love that look in Mick's eye when he sees Garen's fighting him on something. He's like, "No, Mick, I think it's it should be going to channel 7." He's like, and he knows it's not right. And he just lets you kind of string yourself out there.
95% of the time, that's how it goes, and then there's 5% of the time where I'm like, "No, I got this one. I'm gonna win this one."
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about favorite gear item of the week.
I showed Mick a digital performer trick. I was very proud of that because Mick always knows everything,
Yeah, when you Mick's a know-it-all, but for good reason, because he pretty much does know it all. But once in a while, you catch him, and he just doesn't like it. You gotta, sometimes you have to be the exception to the rule, to prove that Mick knows it all. Once in a while, he has to not know it, and that proves it. So we're on to favorite gear of the week. So instead of boring you with more audio this week, we're gonna do Garen's favorite piece of gear relating to. Go ahead.
So, over the last year or so, my roommate and we have enjoyed making cocktails for people, having people over and making some nice drinks. And we discovered a huge part of that is the ice that you use. So I'm going to talk you guys through my ice making setup. Basically,
So not only is he a coffee snob, he's also a whiskey and ice snob now as well.
He's not a whiskey. He's not a whiskey snob.
That's I'll leave that to you
Oh,
guys.
you're just the ice snob.
Yeah. So yeah, I enjoy making super clear, clean ice. And should I do like the whole rundown on it?
Probably
Just,
not.
just give us the basic principle of how you make how you make one of those big square ice cubes that's
Sure.
perfectly see-through.
Well, okay. So the way to make clear ice, the biggest key for it is how it freezes. So when water freezes in a direction, so like if it freezes from the top down, that is what creates the clear ice because it pushes all the impurities and the air bubbles down to the bottom as it freezes. The way that you accomplish that is by freezing something inside of something that's insulated, like a cooler. So if you use like an igloo cooler, take the top off of it, fill it with water, and then all sides are insulated except for the top. So it's only getting the cold air from the top. So it'll freeze from the top down, which takes a long time to do. So it takes about 2 days to get a chunk of ice that's about 2 to 3 inches thick.
And then so you do that. You're using like an actual.
So I'm doing it at home. There's machines that do this that cost thousands of dollars and do it way better, but I'm doing it in an igloo cooler.
And then you end
at
up with
home.
a big rectangle, and you're cutting it, or
and then
just
you cut
breaking it randomly.
No, so I cut it into cubes and do
What
that.
do you use to cut it?
So I use you take the ice out of the cooler and then you leave it in the room for about 20 to 30 minutes and let it temper to the room. So it kind of just adjusts to it. Because if you just try and start cutting it, it'll just like fragment off.
Right.
So you let it sit for like 20 or 30 minutes. And then I use a serrated knife and like start a cut. And once I'm just barely into the ice, then I hit the knife with a mallet. And then it just slices right through it.
You better
Nice
not bring
clean
this
cut.
shit on the bus.
No, I won't. Don't worry.
So at what
And then
point
you
do
put what,
you
Jack and Coke in it?
put
Yeah,
the
you put
Mountain Dew
Sunny
in
D.
when?
Yeah, then I drink Capri Sun.
We have our WhatsApp group. You sent us a picture of that, and the truth of the matter is, we were all actually very impressed and like, oh, that would be so nice in our fancy whiskeys. But there were like 30 jokes at your expense.
Oh, there was a lot of them.
just for sending a picture of ice.
Well, what we'll do is we'll throw up a couple pictures
Yeah,
of ice.
I'll
'Cause,
send
Garen,
the
Garen
ice.
pulled out his phone yesterday and he showed me another picture of his famous ice, and we'll throw up a picture there. You can't even see it; it's that clear.
It's very clear. It's fantastic.
It's very cool.
Let's talk briefly about another piece of gear. We won't get into details because we actually talked about this a lot, but the PSM 1000s, which are the Shure.
The Shure wireless packs.
Yeah,
that
so
we
I
use,
mean, basically, let's talk about one little aspect that we've not talked about in terms of this monitoring and what we do with these wireless packs is what's called a Q pack.
Yeah, so as an engineer, as a monitor engineer in particular, it's an odd place to be listening to things because I'm trying to listen to a bunch of other people's mixes. So how do we explain this best?
Basically, you can tune in to listen to any one of our mixes on your pack, which is a wireless pack receiving the audio from the mixing console.
So there's two things. So I always have a pack that can actually change to your frequency, to like the exact radio frequency that each band member is listening to, and I can listen to your packs that way. I also have my own frequency, which I can cue on the console what is being sent to that, and I can pop through mixes that way.
So basically, it just allows you to be checking all four of us, and that's one of the most important things. And a good monitor engineer kind of figures out the problem before you have to be waving on stage saying, "Hey, this is something going wrong."
The big thing on the biggest thing for me is actually the ability to like matrix my Q pack. What that means is I don't just listen to like Dylan's mix. While I'm listening to Dylan's mix, I also might need to be talking to Mo across stage.
Right.
And so, or Mick at front of house, or like the radios that we use, the, like the walkie-talkie radios that we use. I said walkie-talkie.
The rest of the touring industry.
Yeah, so it's like I'm listening to all these things, but I don't want you guys listening to those. And so I like have a pretty good matrix set up into my pack to listen to all the things going on at that time.
I guess for our listeners, this amount of detail may, it's a lot to take in, but I think, what you can gather from it, and this is all stuff that we've learned as our touring has kind of gone from being in little bars to what we do now, is the amount of detail that it's a very skilled position, people who are touring crew. They're not just pushing boxes. There's an amazing amount of detail that is required to make a show. When you walk into a venue and you see the lights come up and you see the sound come up and it all goes well, that everything that's behind that we find particularly interesting. Obviously it's our career and our world. But if you go, next time you go to a show, you might have a little idea of what the band members are going through, what the engineers are going through, all the detail that's involved in making that happen smoothly.
Mm-hmm. I think people really don't know about that or appreciate it. Even I had a friend once come up to Mo after we were doing a few shows, and Mo's stage manages for us, and he also sings a couple songs with us occasionally. And I had a friend come up and go, "Man, you got like the greatest job in the world. You just like travel around the world with these guys, and then go up on stage for 7 minutes, and then that's it." And then that's what he thought his job was, and he didn't realize that the work and skill and effort that goes into putting a concert together is just all behind the scenes.
He's a special kind of moron, that guy.
So there's a kind of a good segue maybe into our what's it like being in a band with your brothers section, because we wanted to talk about the broader definition of that on the road.
Yeah.
The fact that a lot of crews are like this, but we've specifically tried to build our crew out of people that we can get along with. Yeah. And everyone that's on the road knows that pretty much the most important thing is, doesn't matter how many microphones you know about. Like, if we want to murder you at the end of 3 weeks or vice versa,
I'm not getting hired again.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. So that's a big aspect of being on the road, is that there's this extended family because you're literally spending more time than you spend with your wife or your parents or anybody.
Yeah. It's interesting as for all the other artists that I've worked for, this band has been an exception. It's been different than most of the time I do that, because we've been working together for years now, and it's the same people. It's never changed. Really, we've added people, and we've had to fill in here and there, but for the most part, it's the exact same touring crew as we had 3.5 years ago. Yeah, which is a very interesting dynamic. Which, you're right, that does mean I've spent more time with you guys than any of my my friends or my best friends, people I would consider my best friends outside of this group.
You have best friends other than us?
I have a lot of buddies. But yeah, we spend so much time together that the ability to not just get along, but to have fun and to be friends outside of 90% of what we do is not on stage. Even more than that. It's like 97% of what we do is off the stage. That's all of our interactions are outside of that. So as well as things might go on the stage, like the other 97% of the time is just as, if not more important than what happens on the stage.
Yeah, for anyone who's interested in this lifestyle, if thinks they want to tour or they want to either be in a band or in a crew, and you're in a relationship, it's a bit of a hard sell.
What's that?
A relationship.
Oh,
a relationship outside of the dudes on the bus. Imagine trying to go to your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, any relationship that you have, and say, "Hey, I'm going to do this job where I'm going to be spending more time with a bunch of dudes than you for 8 months of the year." It's not an easy sell. There's a reason why people do this job, because it's amazing. You get amazing experiences. It's fun. It's rewarding and all that. But it comes at a price.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you ever been on a tour where there was a particularly bad interpersonal relationship on the bus?
Yes, absolutely.
And what is that like? We've been lucky enough not to have that.
Yeah, last year I was working for someone, and I don't think I've told you guys this. I almost got in a fist fight. I'm like the last person that's going to get in a fight. And I remember thinking that I was about to get in like a full-on fight. It actually, ironically, it happened on stage, not off stage. But yeah, it was like this guy that I did not get along with off stage, and then he made some mistakes on stage that he was yelling at someone that he had no right to be yelling at, and I was the stage manager, and so I kind of intervened, and it didn't go very well.
I'm just trying to imagine, like, you picture that now, and then you had to go sleep on a bus in a bunk like 4 feet away from him.
Thankfully, so this is the night before like a week-long break.
Okay.
So it was perfect timing for it to happen because I didn't have to see him for the next week.
But you just imagine, like, everywhere, like someone working a typical office cubicle job. Imagine the jerk in cubicle 7 that you hate walking past his cubicle, her cubicle, whatever, and then you have to go sleep next to them.
Yeah. And
like
eat dinner
for 3 or 4 months,
and see them every single hour.
Yeah, so
of the day.
I mean, we, like, knock wood, we've been very lucky that we haven't had that, and it's engineered partially. It's also luck.
Was he the stage manager who showed up drunk?
No, that wasn't a stage manager, but it was on that tour, and it was that was another story where someone got fired.
We've been on tour with another band where they had just hired a new crew member, and a week in, got in a fist fight with an actual fist fight with a long-running crew member of theirs, and immediately had to be sent home. I was only out with them for a week, and they got in a fist fight on the bus, and they woke up, and they ended up, resolving it, but they're like, dude, we just hired you a week ago, and now you got to go home.
It was over a girl, if I remember correctly. All the story in the book.
See, that's why I tour so much. I don't have to deal with that.
So I guess we'll carry on talking about this into segment 7. You said you didn't really have an idea of going out on the road, and you kind of grew up in a fairly religious background, we would say. We don't have to get into any details about that, but you grew up in a certain way, and then you went to live this life on the road which is essentially a bunch of pirates that are just drinking, swearing, smoking. Like, it's like that part of it is fairly accurate. That it's just it's rough and tumble, just craziness on the road.
Like carnies.
Yeah.
So how was that adjusting to that? How did it change the way you've thought about your life, about everything? Because it became your life now for 3 or 4 years. You've been so immersed in it.
Yeah. Like, as you said, I grew up in like a fairly traditional Christian home. And so like my thoughts of the world were fairly contained into like one idea. And then like even when I went to college, like I stuck in that. I went to a Christian university, and then a couple years later I started touring, and all of a sudden I'm like with this completely different group of people that I had never really interacted with before. Like I'd never really been around rock and roll bands or rappers or whoever I might be working for. And you see like you see the entire world. We've got to see the entire world. I've been in like crazy different cultures, from like when we spent time in South Africa to going to Russia and experiencing that. And the biggest thing is probably like understanding that, there's a lot of other lives out there, just in general. There's a lot of other way people live than what I had grown up living. And so experiencing that in our context, it's changed a lot in my life of how I interact with people and how I talk to people, and even all the way back to like my family. Like I interact with my family very differently now as like an adult too, not being a kid anymore, growing up in their house. But
you ask them what they want in their mix.
Yeah,
Mom, I'm turning you down.
It's not. I think it's an obvious point if you view it as that, which is that there's different people the way and they live differently. But I would say that you don't really get that experience other than viscerally, as you said, because you can go watch documentaries about. You can watch, Human Planet and have David Attenborough narrate about the different way people live, and that's valid. It's a source of information.
But experiencing it and like actually being in locations with people that are totally different than you.
Well, it's
actually can have an effect on your life.
I remember we were in Mexico City at the beginning of this year. You and Jason and Mo, I think, and I were walking around a square there. And I was just thinking about this kind of silly idea that, like, if you had some kind of weird social program that forced everyone to travel for a year, it would dramatically change the way people interact with one another, because it's impossible to hold on to any really steady idea of how like human beings should live.
Yeah.
And then meet millions of human beings or millions of different ways of living. You just can't have that same belief and think this is the one way everyone should live.
Yeah, definitely. And that's
it's impossible.
That's probably, you're probably hit it right on the head. That's one of the biggest things that's changed, is that I grew up believing this was the way of life. This is how I live my life. This is how I'm supposed to live my life. It's how everybody should live their life, is what I'm doing. It's right. That's also because I always think I'm right.
But I don't think that's any different from the way most people, and us probably included, view life. I think maybe people, when they hear that story, they think, oh, that traditional Christian, maybe myopic view of life is not the way I live life. But really, if it is the way everyone lives life. Everyone has a myopic view.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that once you've been able to do what we do and travel as we have, especially with a group that has these kinds of conversations a lot late at night, and that view changes. So it's not even about my view anymore. It's about just saying, oh, there's a lot of things here that we haven't discussed or even explored. So who am I to think that I'm right?
Well, I think, Garen, you are, if you don't mind me saying, I would consider you have a moderate temperament, and it's one of the essential qualities of this life is if you're easily fazed by things, if you get angry easily or depressed easily or whatever, tour life just doesn't work for you, because you literally have a new challenge thrown at you every day. It's a strange life. And so where you came from, and then all these experiences that are thrown at you, a certain kind of temperament might take that and have a very reactionary, the classic story of somebody who just rebels and kind of maybe goes exactly opposite to where they came from. And from my perspective, I wouldn't categorize your experience as that. Is that you've taken a very moderate and sort of logical look at what you've encountered over the last few years, and the idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that doesn't seem to come into your lifestyle. That's my view, and I think that's valuable. Is that one thing is not necessarily drastically better than another thing, but you seem to be able to take the good from all kinds of.
Thanks, Jesse.
Okay, that appreciate compliment over. Back.
You're talking about when people grow up in a specific way of life, and then the pendulum just swings.
Yeah, you react. I've a number of friends that I had growing up reacted and went and moved somewhere and experienced a completely different culture than they grew up with, and threw everything away.
Become militant,
from their childhood.
Anarchic atheists living in Berlin.
It's usually an indication that what they had from their childhood is so deeply embedded that they're emotionally reacting to it.
Yeah,
and it's not
totally.
they're not really getting rid of it, because to get rid of something that was embedded in childhood is a very slow, difficult, confusing thing. You can't just change the outward. You change your clothes and get a new job, and then everything from your childhood is gone.
Yeah, we're talking at least
new set
about
of friends.
Reacting to it, the shock value of being homeschooled your entire life, and then...
Wait, were you homeschooled?
No, I wasn't. No, sorry. I'm speaking of friends from other experiences. Someone who's homeschooled their entire life, and then all of a sudden thrown go to a big state school for college. Yeah. That's a huge shock, and the majority of the time that you see that sort of thing happen, that person goes very far, in some direction.
Yeah.
It's...
And try as we might, no matter how many times we play Come With Me Now to you, we've yet to convert you to Satanism.
Well, what's interesting is that, there's Mormons, they call them Jack Mormons, when they kind of grow into adulthood. Jack Mormon is someone who's strayed so far from Mormonism that, they'll be drinking Pepsi or something like that.
No,
that's a long ways.
Jack and Pepsi and they stray very far. What's interesting is that the Amish supposedly have... that the majority of people, because they have something in their culture that they almost are forced to go out and experience the world for a year once they turn 16 or 18 or something like that. They're forced to leave the community behind, and they go out and experience the world, and they They get up to some crazy shit supposedly, and then but the majority of them actually go back to Amish.
I mean, from
living.
their perspective, that's a good thing, and then from another person's perspective, that's like a recidivism rate, right? So depending on what your bent is, so yeah, depending on what you think of as good, then somebody going back to what they grew up with or not is good or bad. So like you,
well, I guess I have a question: is how do you inculcate that idea of being open to different different ways of life and different perspectives if someone's not able, if they don't have the financial means to travel? You know, a program like that, a social program like you were talking, I know you're being somewhat facetious, but that would bankrupt the world.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean it like literally. I just mean in a theoretical like game simulation mode. Imagine if every kid came out of college, spent a year traveling. I think it would dramatically change the amount of kind of stupid, old-fashioned racism or classism or xenophobia that exists.
would it? Because what about people who traveled? I mean, and still came back with their
you're not going to eliminate it. But
what is the inner? What is it in your inner life that you can try to teach or open someone else up to? That might not have the possibility of traveling for work or traveling after college or seeing out of their own and experiencing other ways of life and cultures.
I don't know if you can. I feel like it's something that probably I would think it's just something innate in people. Like you can have someone go travel the world for a long time, and they can come back and still be stuck in the exact same thought in the exact same way that they are.
I think it has to be quite a strong, something that snaps you out of your normal mode of being and gives you a true sense of empathy, which means really that you have to confront something that's not permanent, or it's like you need to confront your own death. Maybe not that extreme of an example, but like where you can no longer be attached to the way that you acted before. If people can have these same types of experiences, I think, where they become more open to and less judgmental or kind of single-minded and myopic through a number of ways of happening. Like they have a medical emergency or they have a loved one that they lose. It just opens up their mind to the possibility of other ways of existing.
Well, so I mean, you're talking about basically a shock that snaps you out of your automatic behavior. I mean, I think the first thing to recognize is that it's unbelievably hard to break what you've grown up with, to break the sort of patterns that have been inculcated in you from birth, whether it's your natural surroundings or it's the culture or your family or your school or whatever. These things get programmed into us, and that's almost impossible to break. So I think, without trying to diagnose the world's or each individual's problem within the world, I think a simple thought that I try to kind of have occasionally, which is that maybe I'm not right. It's as simple as that. Maybe, just maybe I'm not right.
I think you're right, Jesse. No, but
That's the only time I've been right.
I could go along with what you said. It takes a long time, because I would probably say that even with my the life that I grew up with, and over the last 3 to 4 years, my experiences, and they don't contradict each other or anything, but it's the last few years has been like what's the word? A progression of thought for me, and it's probably wasn't until the last year or so in which I think I was finally able to say, okay, I'm going to take a step back here and actually be able to think about this properly. Think about life and think about, getting outside of the only thing that I knew growing up and being able to step back from this. So it probably wasn't even until like the last year or 6 months where I've been able to do that logically and what I feel like was soundly.
Yeah, I think there's something I've noticed on the road. A lot of people tend to fall into this nihilism of where it's not anti-religious. It's just literally everyone's is looking for some novel new experience because things get boring out on the road. Mm-hmm. So you end up meeting a lot of these people on the road that are just like, I feel like they're just drifting, looking for like the next thrill. Because like there's only so many bars you can go to. You start looking for like, oh, I need some new little thrill that can give me some meaning or like feel like it's not all just the same.
Yeah.
But that's not exclusive to road life.
No, it's definitely more evident though, because you experience what you experienced in the town you grew up in, and then you experience that in every single other place on the planet. And
right. But without that contrast, you would not perceive movement in any.
Yeah, it's the movement aspect of it that highlights, because we're all doing the same. We're all basically repeating the same thing every day.
But that this is what's that? What were you saying? Maybe I'm wrong.
I was just saying that once in a while, if you just allow that thought to pop into your head, maybe I'm not right, in whatever I'm thinking, or what the current sort of the momentum of a thought, where it starts to have a momentum of its own, where you think, oh, this is how I think about this subject, or this is correct, this is my opinion. It has a momentum where you no longer are forcing it. It's just going on its own. And if you step out of that for a second and just say, maybe I'm wrong, that's enough. That's enough to get the ball rolling.
Pain. For me, that's the painful part. Is not acknowledging you were wrong is actually relief. Because that's when you give up on your idea, and that's a great relief. It's like it's the part before that where something in the back of your mind thinks you're wrong, and that's that tension between the two things. Because once you're beyond that, that threshold, and you've just accepted that you were wrong about something, it's actually it's a great relief.
It's fighting that attachment you have to the feeling of being right is...
Yeah, that's the pain. That's the painful
attachment
part,
is everywhere. You should make that a hashtag. That should be the #1 political hashtag for 2020.
Do it more often, I think.
As Garen, has being on the road, obviously some of it has made you question certain of your, foundation or your ideas that you've stuck to, but has anything strengthened, or is there anything specific where being on the road has strengthened certain ideas that you grew up with, or reinforced anything like that?
No, I don't think, like, I couldn't see anything that has like strengthened. I don't know if those are the right terms to talk about it in, but yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. I haven't thought about it enough to say something that would be coherent.
Well, you were very coherent in saying that you don't know how to respond, so I'll give you points for that.
Well, you could have said something, but maybe you would have been wrong.
I would have just been talking out my ass anyway. So,
what was that euphemism that we heard? Intellectual phase coherence, for when people.
That's whatever you just said. It made sense.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, what was that in the context of?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It was Rupert Sheldrake, that guy. See, I'm not in a position to scientifically evaluate this stuff, but he was talking about the fact when they were doing speed of light tests, and when they had the technology to study this, they kept getting different results with regard to the speed of light. It wasn't constant, and before they settled on a constant speed of light as an average, 186,000 miles per second. And so they were adjusting their numbers in a lot of their studies. And when he asked one of the head of the department of, MIT for constants, all this fucking guy studies is constants in the universe. And he said, they were getting different results on the speed of light. And he says, yeah, it's a dark period in the history of science. And he said, is it just fudge factors? And he said, no, it's intellectual phase coherence, which is when groups of people agree on something by making little nudge adjustments to their data.
Right.
But did we have the conversation about the Mandela effect before? Have we talked about that?
Not sure.
Was that with a different group of people?
Mandela, as
in Nelson Mandela.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, I've heard this. I just don't know what.
Well, it's the idea that it's communally misremembering things.
Oh, weird.
Oh, right.
So it's like an entire group of people can misremember an event, or like they use an example of how everybody. So Star Wars is coming out in December. Everybody, when they're quoting Star Wars, says, "Luke, I am your father," and that's not the line. He never says the word Luke in the movie. Like in that moment, he doesn't say that at all.
It's from Tommy Boy. That's what they're remembering.
Yeah, it could be.
So
but
what's the relation? Why is it called?
So
Mandela effect?
there's, you guys.
It's the aura. You mean it's that? You mean
it's the idea of, because it started when whoever came up with it was talking about in South Africa. There was a whole group of people that remembered Nelson Mandela dying, or something along those lines, before he actually did. I don't remember the whole thing about it, but there was this entire group of people or nation that remembered that guy died and he didn't, or like, you know, it was something to do with that. But it's, if you look it up, you'll find it. Examples of the Mandela effect.
Well, there's what's it called? Shazam, that movie, right? Not the app. People.
Are you talking about the movie with Shaq?
Right. That's exactly perfect. It's Kazam. Everybody remembers it as Shazam.
That's crazy. See, it's like there's all sorts of things like that.
And there's also, but there's another element to that story, which they remember other actors in it.
People thought Sinbad was in it, but it was Shaq.
Right, yeah. The people are like, it was a movie with Sinbad called Shazam.
Yeah.
All right, well, the Mandela effect refers to a phenomenon in which a large number of people share false memories of past events, referred to as confabulation in psychiatry. Some have speculated that the memories are caused by parallel universes splitting into our own, while others explain the phenomenon as a failure of collective memory. The origin is in 2010, blogger Fiona Broom coined the term Mandela effect to describe a collective false memory she discovered at the Dragon Con convention, where many others believed that former South African President Nelson Mandela died during the imprisonment in the 1980s. That year, Broom launched the site Mandela Effect to document various examples of the phenomenon, and then it gives a bunch of different ideas of where basically collective false memory.
Well, yeah, just like what you were saying with the what was the term? Phase.
Oh, intellectual phase coherence.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he was meaning by that.
I just drew parallels between those two things.
Well, I think before it gets a little too discombobulated for us all and we lose all energy for the rest of the evening's work, should we leave it at that and say thank you to Geron Rains, G, as we know him, for this wonderful podcast, and also for the wonderful work he does that helps our stage show happen. And speaking of phase coherence, let's go sort out those speakers that were
that's good.
Giving us
we have been having some phase coherence issues with those.
Yeah, thanks, Garen. We'll see you guys next week. Make sure you head to kongos.com/podcast. I'm going to keep saying it weird every time.
There is one last thing I would like to say about that, is that when we've gotten a lot of comments and questions of people saying that they're not getting notified or they don't know where to find the podcast. Obviously, it's Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, and as well as our website. But if you hit subscribe and you turn on push notifications in your settings on your phone, every time we upload a new podcast, it will show a little notification on your phone, so you won't be left in the dark.
Cool. All right.
See you guys next week.
Lounge with Kongos. We're going to find a weirder way to say podcast every week.